Hi, this is Dr. Christopher Perrin, and welcome to this episode of The Christopher Perrin Show. In this episode, I'm going to be presenting on the great figure Odysseus, the wandering man from the Trojan War, seeking to get back to his home and his wife on the island kingdom of Ithaca. Odysseus is a well-known archetype of a traveling, wandering person, war-weary, and seeking to return home. Odysseus, the man of twists and turns. Let's look at the pros and cons of being a twisting, turning man like Odysseus, who was clever and curious. Odysseus has given us the word Odyssey. His story is a story of wandering, a story of adventure and quest, a story of seeking a way back home. The Greek word for homecoming is nostos. Nostos. And aren't we all fond of homecoming? And if we're not, don't we wish we had a bright, warm home that we could return to? The word home settles deep in our bones. Home connotes fire and hearth, welcome and refuge, order and peace. Who really doesn't long for that kind of home? Odysseus longs for home, and he weeps for home. And even though he's the most valiant warrior, a man strong and cunning, the most capable in battle, Odysseus does not want to leave his home for battle, even though he eventually did, as king of Ithaca, taking with him many of his worthy soldiers from Ithaca, soldiers and sailors, all from his island kingdom, and leaving his young wife Penelope and his infant son Telemachus. Do you know this story? Odysseus was so reluctant to leave for Troy to go to war, where Helen was held as a willing captive by Paris, the prince of Troy. Menelaus was the king of Sparta, and the enraged husband of Helen, reputed to be the most beautiful woman in the world. And Menelaus insisted that all the Greek kings muster their sailors and soldiers and ships and go to recover Helen, his wife, by as much force as necessary. And this sets up the Battle of Troy. But Odysseus had his own beautiful wife, Penelope, and he was unwilling to leave. So when called upon by a collection of great kings to go fight at Troy, he feigned madness, Odysseus did, hitching a donkey and an ox to a plow and sowing salt, not seeds, in his fields. Here is a king pretending to be mad, reminding us that King David also did the same thing when he was held captive by the Philistines. Do you remember that story? And we might as well recall that David, too, loved a beautiful woman, Bathsheba, and that love for that woman brought him much trouble. Those observing Odysseus's madness doubted it, and they put his madness to the test by placing his young son Telemachus in the way of his plow and revealed the ruse, for Odysseus directed his plow around his young son. So, alas, he was then on his way to Troy to fight. He, the clever, scheming, wily Odysseus, the man of many twists and turns. His wiliness would serve him and the Greeks well in the war against Troy, for it was Odysseus's plan and scheme to send a huge horse to the gates of Troy after 10 years of battle, yes, 10 years of weary war. And the Trojans debated whether or not to open the gates and welcome the horse. Beware of Greeks bearing gifts, is how the maxim goes. But seeing the scores of ships departing from the coast, the Trojans let the horse in, which was full of quietly cramped Greek warriors, including Odysseus himself. Yes, the famed Trojan horse. This was the brainchild of Odysseus. You know how this episode ends, with the conquest of Troy. The ships return, finding the city already on fire. The destruction of Troy is complete. Well, that's the short version of the Iliad, the epic that precedes the Odyssey, both by Homer. But now Odysseus must get home after 10 years of war. And this begins the Odyssey. We might guess that he's in his early 30s now, and his young wife is waiting for him to return home to Ithaca. This shouldn't take too long. It shouldn't, but it does. And why? Because Odysseus is polytropic. Now, you probably weren't expecting that. Odysseus is polytropic. This is how Homer describes him in the opening lines of the Odyssey. Sing to me, O Muse, of the man of many twists and turns. The Greek word is polytropos. Odysseus is described as polytropos. We know the Greek adjective poly. It means many. We see it in words like polymath, someone who knows or has knowledge of many disciplines, polyglot, someone who knows many languages, and poly this and poly that, polytech, polyclinic, polypolitical. Polytropos means many turns. Those who've studied English and rhetoric know that a trope is the turning of a phrase. Irony is a trope when we turn one word to mean another, or its opposite, such as airline food, etc. And when we say she really knows how to turn a phrase, we're speaking of tropes. Even our phrase, the tropics, has a reference to the turning, in this case, the turning of the globe near the equator, where a predictable climate resides, along with a great variety of delicious fruit. Even our word anthropology retains this turning phrase, for the Greek word anthropos, Greek for man, means a turning, a tropos, upward, ana. Ana means upward, tropos means turning. Man is apparently that creature that alone turns his head upward to gaze and contemplate the stars and think about himself. Odysseus is the anthropos that is not only turned upward, but turned outward and downward and every which way. He is anthropos polytropos, and a formidable person viewed from any direction. And he is set before us in the Odyssey as an ideal. He is the Greek man par excellence. Now, there are many worthy themes in the Odyssey, and there are endless commentaries upon them. Homecoming, hospitality, heroism, justice, prudence, temperance, courage, the cardinal virtues. But if Christ is presented to us by Pilate as the man, when he says, Ecce hominis, behold the man, Homer presents us with Odysseus, Ecce anthropos polytropos. We know the Gospels present us with Christ who has turned his face like flint to Jerusalem and the cross. And after Troy, Odysseus turns his face towards home. But not only home. How does Odysseus turn? Well, first he's turned by others, namely the god Poseidon, the god of the sea, who has it out for him because Poseidon is opposed to Athena, and Athena, the goddess Athena, has taken on Odysseus as her pet project, her current obsession. The drama played out by Poseidon and Athena is a 10-year affair that gets added to the 10-year war at Troy, making it 20 years before Odysseus will return to the shores of Ithaca. We hear the tale of this 10-year odyssey back home, his sailing home, when near the end of his travels he finds himself detained at the kingdom of Phaeacia at a long banquet in which he is prodded to tell his tale. He tells his tale to King Alcinous and Queen Arete and their guests. And in the process, he tells his story to us as well. As soon as he left Troy, Odysseus tells us, Poseidon brings a twisting storm that hinders Odysseus' singular focus to return home to Penelope and Telemachus at Ithaca. And well, he should return home, because after 10 years, there's now a band of 108 available bachelors anxious to marry Penelope and become king. They've been waiting 10 years and no return for Odysseus. And of course, there's going to be another 10 years. So we're going to be getting to 20 years. These suitors are thinking, one of us should marry Penelope. They're squatting each day at her palace, demanding daily feasts and demanding that she choose one of them to marry. After all, it has been a long, long time, and Odysseus is clearly not coming home. Well, Poseidon sends him crashing here and there on the seas, and he ends up marooned on an island with a beautiful goddess Calypso. He ends up staying there for 7 years, and though a mortal, she's quite taken with him and provides for him sumptuously, offering him her body, which he accepts as if he had no choice, fine food, and a beautiful setting, all for 7 years. This 7-year interlude only serves to make the suitors back at Ithaca more antsy and Penelope, his wife, more despondent. Calypso even offers to make Odysseus immortal. Now, who wouldn't take that offer? Not Odysseus. He weeps for Penelope, longing to return home, weary first from war and now weary after 7 years cavorting with a goddess in paradise. What kind of a man is this? Has he not come to his senses much like the prodigal son? He is ready to return home after lusty living, but not as a servant, like the prodigal son, who says, just let me be a servant in your household, but as the rightful king of Ithaca. With some help from Athena, the goddess Athena, and Hermes, the messenger god, he is set free from Calypso on a raft after 7 years, a raft that he has made with his own hands, because he's crafty in this way too. He can build rafts. Poseidon is still allowed to buffet the seas and make his journey a twisting, tough go, but he's delivered, exhausted, ruined, and wrecked on the seashore of Phaeacia, and there he's welcomed into the palace of King Alcinous and his wife, Arete, the queen of virtue. Arete is Greek for virtue, and some think there's a play here on her name and virtue, some think not. And there he's given the opportunity to tell his long story. So we can note that Odysseus twists and turns on the sea, in large part thanks to the schemes of Poseidon. But it is not only Poseidon who turns his ship. Odysseus himself turns the rudder and turns the ship. He turns his ship aside when we expect that he would not and that he should not. Isn't he weeping to get home to Penelope and his son, Telemachus? But he turns aside on several occasions, delaying his return. He turns aside to explore the land of the Cyclops, a fatal decision for several of his men who end up being gobbled by the Cyclops, gobbled raw, a Cyclops named Polyphemus. In this case, Polyphemus means many times spoken or renowned. That's what the word means, Polyphemus. And Polyphemus asks Odysseus his name, and Odysseus answers that his name is nobody, which in Greek happens to be Outis. So he says, I'm Outis, no one or nobody. And when Polyphemus, who loses his one eye on account of his encounter with Odysseus, cries out for help, he yells out saying, nobody is attacking me. Nobody is attacking. And of course, when his fellow Cyclops hear this, none of them come to help him, since no one is really attacking him. It is Odysseus whose name, ironically, becomes renowned, the nobody who becomes somebody indeed. After all, you know the name of Odysseus, but will you remember poor Polyphemus? What is in a name? It's the question that Odysseus asks. Does your name mean something? Will your name be remembered? The Greeks are concerned to be remembered. The dead hope to live on in the memories of the living. This is one of the only hopes that the Greeks had, was to be remembered by the living, because they really didn't have a belief in heaven as we do, as we understand it. Who will remember you? Will God remember you? The thief on the cross next to Christ cries out, remember me, O Lord, when you come into your kingdom. The name Odysseus means to us now one who wanders and tries to return home. And so we recognize ourselves in him because we, too, are trying to find our way home. Christians confess this, knowing that our citizenship is in heaven. And since the time of Adam and Eve, we've been seeking a city whose architect and builder is God, as we read in Hebrews 11. Christ promises to bring us back to the garden, back to a kingdom, back to what we long for as home. But the name Odysseus literally means the one who suffers, or as Odysseus himself tells us, the son of pain. We're reminded that Christ descended to become one of us before ascending again to the Father, and he was made like us in all respects. Hungered, he thirsted, he suffered want, and he simply suffered, as we all do. And he's called in Isaiah the man of sorrows, well acquainted with grief. So Christ, too, is the son of pain. This is why the ancient Christians and those Christians who were of Greek blood read such passages. This is how they read such passages in the Odyssey. Clement of Alexandria, living in the 200s AD and a Greek, describes Greek philosophy this way. He says, "Perchance, too, philosophy was given to the Greeks directly and primarily till the Lord should call the Greeks. For this was a schoolmaster to bring the Hellenic mind, as the law brought the Hebrews, to Christ. Philosophy, therefore, was a preparation, paving the way for him who is perfected in Christ." Odysseus arguably should not have turned aside to explore the land of the Cyclops. Why did he make this turn? He was curious. Don't you turn your attention to those things that are curious to you? It may come as a surprise to some, but some of the Greek and Roman moralists before Christ regarded curiosity as a vice. Sometimes curiosity seems to lead to important insights and discoveries, but sometimes it is destructive and will kill the curious cat, even the one with 9 lives. Odysseus says that he wanted to learn about the customs and laws of these Cyclops. And here's what he says: "I called a muster briskly, commanding all the hands. The rest of you stay here, my friends in arms. I'll go across with my own ship and crew and probe the natives living there. Who are they? Violent, savage, lawless, or friendly to strangers? God-fearing men?" Now, what could be wrong with this? He seems to be engaging in a bit of anthropology, and anthropology is a fine study. But when is it a fine study? Wasn't he weeping to get back home to Penelope? The ancient philosophers made a distinction between curiositas, curiosity as a vice, and studiositas, which is a virtue. So curiositas, a vice, studiositas, a virtue. Dante, for example, places Odysseus in the inferno for this vice of curiositas, which had conquered him. And we read this from Dante. "From Circe he had departed, who concealed," this is actually Odysseus speaking to Dante in, I believe it's Canto 26 of the Inferno. "From Circe had departed, who concealed me more than a year near unto Gaeta, or ever yet Aeneas named it so." That's from the Aeneid, making a reference to the Aeneid there. "Nor fondness for my son, nor reverence for my old father, nor the due affection which joyous should have made Penelope, could overcome within me the desire I had to be experienced of the world, and of the vice and virtue of mankind. But I put forth on the high open sea with one sole ship, and that small company by which I never had deserted been." So Odysseus is overcome with a curious desire to have experience of the world, to explore the vice and virtue of mankind. And that curiosity led him to turn aside from his pathway home to Ithaca. He later, Odysseus does, turns aside to explore an island when he spots smoke rising from somewhere in its interior. You're driving by in a ship, sailing by, and you see some smoke rising. Where's that smoke coming from? Would you be curious, especially in the ancient world, knowing that that was a sign of some creature living there? So he turns aside. Where there is smoke, there is. And so Odysseus again is curious, and as it turns out, the smoke rises from the chimney of an enchantress named Circe. Her specialty is turning men into pigs, and she's happy to employ this skill, turning all but one of Odysseus's men into such creatures, into swine. And this is a problem that will take time to sort out. He's able to sort it out because, well, Odysseus is wily and crafty, and he has some regular help from a wily and crafty goddess, namely Athena. Athena tells him a secret or two about how to fend off Circe with a potion and some choice words. So Odysseus manages to foil Circe and have his sailor pigs turned back to men. In fact, we learn that Athena seems attracted to Odysseus because she is like him in this respect, and they're a fitting mortal-immortal pair. They resemble each other in their craftiness. Towards the end of the journey, she reveals herself plainly to Odysseus, and they exchange these fitting words. Here's what Athena says to Odysseus. Any man, any god who met you, would have to be some champion lying cheat to get past you for all-round craft and guile. You terrible man, foxy, ingenious, never tired of twists and tricks. So not even here on native soil would you give up those wily tales that warm the cockles of your heart. Come, enough of this now. We're both old hands at the art of intrigue. Here among mortal men, you're far the best at tactics, spinning yarns, and I am famous among the gods for wisdom, cunning wiles too. Ah, but you never recognized me, did you? Pallas Athena, daughter of Zeus, who always stands beside you, shields you in every exploit. Athena is present with Odysseus every step of the way, but she only intervenes on her own terms, seemingly enjoying the drama that she, to a large extent, oversees. She can appear as mentor, actually as someone named Mentor, by which we get this idea and name Mentor. She can appear as mentor or even a ship captain as needed. She can make Odysseus seem stronger, younger, taller. She can surround him with a mist when it's advantageous for him to go unseen. She can add curls to his hair, and yes, she does this at least once. When Odysseus is not sure what he should say, Athena assures him he will be given the words he needs when he needs them, the right words to say, recalling to mind what Christ tells his disciples in Luke 12, when Christ says, when you're brought before synagogues, rulers, and authorities, do not worry about how you will defend yourselves or what you will say, for the Holy Spirit will teach you at that time what you should say. What Greek reading the Odyssey would not think it superb to have a daughter of Zeus, that is Athena, with you at all times to guide you, protect you, and give you the right words to say, and make your hair curly if needed? It turns out that this longing is fulfilled in the coming of Christ and the pouring forth of the Holy Spirit. If we have any doubt that Odysseus is a lover of curiosities, all doubt should be removed when he hears about the sweet songs of the Sirens, songs so beautiful that they cannot be resisted, even though they call you toward an unsavory death. He's determined to have his cake and be able to eat it too, or to hear the siren song and not be eaten by the sirens, which is precisely their custom. Bind me to the mast, he tells his sailors, who were just recently pigs, if you recall, but plug your own ears with wax so you will not hear the sweet, irresistible songs of the sirens. And strapped to the mast, he sails by the sirens, and he hears the enticing music, and he even calls out to the sailors to unbind him so that he can heed the sirens' words, that would have killed him. But their ears were plugged and they paid him no mind. Crafty man that he is, he succeeds in this ploy. Do you want to be like him? Do you want to have it both ways, to hear this beautiful music that will kill you and yet not be killed? Did Christ, bound to a tree, do anything similar? He doesn't have it both ways, Christ, or does he? He endured the cross, scorning its suffering for the joy set before him, we read in Hebrews. He descended to hell, and he did succumb to an unsavory death, but in so doing triumphed over the principalities and powers. He was the son of pain, but as the centurion said before the cross, he was also the Son of God. This one could die and travel to the underworld. That would be Odysseus. But this one, Christ, could rise again to life and give life. So perhaps he did have it both ways, dying and living again, but then giving life to the world, a kind of third way. Odysseus too traveled to the underworld, directed there by the goddess Circe, but he seems all too happy to take this underworld adventure. Circe directs him there to get some direction for how to proceed from the sorcerer Tiresias. So is there anywhere that this man won't go? So he's told by Circe to consort with the dead sorcerer Tiresias and to learn how his wife and son are getting along without him at Ithaca and to get further counsel about how to successfully proceed home. If you were offered a trip to the house of the dead, would you take it? What story could you tell when you came back? We would all gather around you to hear your report, certainly. At this point, it's good to remember how much we all love stories. And what story would be more interesting than a tale of your visiting among the dead? One chief setting for the Odyssey is storytelling. For much of the book, Odysseus is seated at a banquet table at the palace of King Alcinous, recounting his backstory of wandering adventure, including his interviews of famous dead people. At one point in the telling of the tale, King Alcinous himself breaks in and he says, "Keep telling us your adventures. They are wonderful. I could hold out here till dawn's first light. If only you bear here in our halls to tell the tale of all the pains you suffered." So the man of countless exploits continued on. Whatever else this is, it's entertainment. In an age before radio, TV, and the internet, and ChatGPT, this was a good way to spend an evening. The Odyssey itself was recited with musical accompaniment around roaring fires and around many an aristocratic table laden with food and wine. Without much else to do, who wouldn't want to hear tales of countless exploits, including visits with the dead? We are all aware, as the Greeks were, of our coming death. Sometimes we push this awareness away, but it's always there somewhere lurking. As Franz Kafka says somewhere, the meaning of life is that it stops. What does it mean to die? We don't know because no one's ever lived to tell us about it. Well, except Odysseus in the Odyssey, and Aeneas in the Aeneid, and Dante in the Divine Comedy, and C.S. Lewis in The Great Divorce, and, of course, Milton's Paradise Regained, and the four Gospel writers, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Odysseus is curious even while he's in Hades, the Greek version of hell. He wants to meet the famous dead. He wants to see his dead mother, Anticlea, and he does. He hears about how she died of grief on Ithaca, waiting for Odysseus to come home. He hears that his father Laertes is also mourning in grief for his son, dressed in rags and sleeping among piles of leaves. Odysseus weeps, and he seeks to embrace his mother 3 times, but she is a misty phantom. But Odysseus will not waste this opportunity to enjoy himself. Even if you're in hell, why not live a little? Why not entertain yourself? Why not exercise your curiosity So he summons great heroes and tragic figures from the past, including Sisyphus and Tantalus. He hears a tale of woe from Agamemnon, who was murdered by his wife upon returning home from Troy, and who advises Odysseus not fully to trust his wife Penelope or any women. Still angry about his deceitful murder at the hands of his wife and lover, Agamemnon asserts, "Now it is the time to stop trusting all women." He meets up with the sorcerer Tiresias, who tells him how to get back to Ithaca safely, though alerting him to the great deal of suffering that yet awaits him, including the loss of his entire crew. This doesn't seem to bother Odysseus enough, in my opinion, and he weeps no tears for the coming demise of his crew, but rather proceeds without delay to interview more interesting and famous persons in Hades. What an opportunity it was. And they are all not happy, the people he interviews. Odysseus is able to talk with his former warrior comrade Achilles, who fought valiantly at Troy. Achilles is the greatest of the dead, described as the ruler of the dead. Would that be a privilege? To lift one's spirits, to be the greatest and most renowned among all the dead? Odysseus greets Achilles as if he were a king in his palace, and he says, "But you, Achilles, there's not a man in the world more blessed than you." Achilles is in Hades, and this is how he's greeted. "There's not a man in the world more blessed than you. There never has been and never will be one. Time was when you were alive, we Argives honored you as a god, and now down here I see you lorded over the dead in all your power. So grieve no more at dying great Achilles." I reassured the ghost, but he broke out protesting, and this is Achilles now speaking, "No winning words about death to me, shining Odysseus. By God, I'd rather slave on earth for another man, some dirt-poor tenant farmer who scrapes to keep alive, than rule down here over all the breathless dead." This, some of you will know, was the passage Milton likely had in mind when he has Satan proclaim in Paradise Lost, "I would rather reign in hell than serve in heaven." The Apostle Paul, contemplating his own coming death, says, "For me to live is Christ. To die is gain." Achilles, for his part, contradicts both Milton's Satan and the Apostle Paul. For Achilles, to serve on earth is better than to reign in hell or Hades. For poor Achilles, there's no hope of heaven. To die is certainly a great loss, as it was apparently for all of the Greeks and all of the Romans, even the Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, who says time and time again in his private diary, the Meditations, that death is fine. It's according to nature, and it comes for all. Death is natural. He has to tell himself this over and over again for 20 years. Clearly, even for a fate-friendly, steely Stoic like Aurelius, death is not gain, but an encroaching loss that he can't shake. Can you shake it? The meaning of life is that it stops. Or are you like Achilles, who would argue even with a Stoic, no more winning words about death? It turns out that the dead are as curious as Odysseus. They are all itching to talk to a living man, and it is unheard that a man from above would visit them from below, or visit them below. So they want news, and they want perhaps just anything new amidst their mundane subterranean existence. Agamemnon, after his brief tirade against trusting women, immediately wants news about his son, and he says, "Enough, come, tell me this and be precise. Have you heard any news of my son? Where's he living now?" Achilles, too, after insisting he would rather be a living slave than a ghost king, does the same thing and says to Odysseus, "But come, tell me news about my gallant son. Did he make his way to the wars? Did the boy become a champion? Yes or no?" Apparently there is precious little news that makes it down below. But here is a living man Odysseus come to visit. He's something special. He's shining Odysseus. If he breached the walls of Troy with that horse trick, might he have a trick to play on this kingdom of the dead? Maybe this time a Hades horse that they could all secretly climb in and then be led out by crafty Odysseus, the liberator of hell. Could that be a possibility? Do they have any hope of being freed? If Orpheus could charm Hades with his beautiful music such that he was granted leave of hell and could even take Eurydice with him, could Odysseus, with all his ingenious craftiness, find a way to lead them out? If he was so favored by the gods to be granted a pass into Hades, could he possibly grant them a pass out of Hades? No, apparently this does not even enter their minds. But does it enter yours? Did those in the palace of Alcinous, hearing this tale being told, hope for a moment that the dead could be freed? Did the countless Greeks who heard the Odyssey recited around fires and laden tables hope at this moment that the story might shift and turn, and that Odysseus could not only leave hell, but take some of its captives with him? What did the Greek man, woman, or child hearing this story think in, say, 400 BC about their own dead parents and grandparents, or about their own approaching death? Tiresias tells Odysseus not only about the ultimate success of his voyage home, but about his final days and his own death. He is told that he will live until a ripe old age and then give up his life peacefully and painlessly, surrounding by those he loves. This seems to be the best a man could hope for. Here's what Tiresias says: "And at last your own death will steal upon you, a gentle, painless death. Far from the sea it comes to take you down, borne down with the years in ripe old age, with all your people there in blessed peace all around you." In the Orthodox Church, Christians pray every Sunday about our coming death. The priest will say, "That we may complete the remaining time of our life in peace and repentance, let us ask of the Lord." And the church responds, "Grant this, O Lord." A Christian ending to our life painless, blameless, peaceful, and a good defense before the dread judgment seat of Christ. Let us ask of the Lord. Grant this, O Lord. But Christians in the Orthodox Church do this before an icon that shows Christ descending into hell, breaking its chains and setting free those captured, beginning with Adam and Eve, whom he takes by their limp wrists and pulls them out of hell. And this icon is often called the harrowing or the destruction of hell. We all turn in many ways, in ways we would rather not turn, and often in ways we don't understand. We are, like Odysseus, polytropic. We turn aside, we turn back. Paul says that he doesn't understand what he does in Romans 7, saying, "What I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do." And then he asks in apparent desperation, "Who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death?" Paul's answer is the answer that wasn't yet available to Homer, his Odysseus, and his Achilles, and his wide and vast audience across the centuries, not until the new Orpheus was born, and then died, and then visited the kingdom of Hades to destroy it and set its captives free. And he did this not by playing beautiful music like Orpheus did, but by the ultimate scheme that tricked the devil and apparently surprised the angels as well, by dying and rising again, conquering death by death. No such scheme was imagined by Odysseus or Athena or Zeus. How did Paul answer his own question, "Who will rescue me from this body subject to death?" He does it this way: "Thanks be to God, who delivers me through Jesus Christ, our Lord." This one Christ calls us to turn aside, to turn away from our own weary wanderings and to turn to Him. We are all polytropic, turning away when we should turn to, allowing our curiosity to distract and sometimes to derail us. Come follow me, He says, and we follow Him to hell and then back. This turn, it turns out, is a return, a homecoming, a nostos. Christ is the new Orpheus. He succeeds where Odysseus had no help of success. Christ was born into the Greco-Roman world, in Palestine, where the languages were Aramaic, Latin, and Greek, a world of Hebrew culture, Roman law, and Greek myth. As the church exploded, it was packed with thousands of Jews, but even more with thousands and thousands of Romans and Greeks who came to see Christ as the fulfillment of all of their mythic and gnostic yearnings. Once G.K. Chesterton, in a debate in the British press, was told by Mr. Lowes Dickinson that the British should reject Christianity and return to paganism. And Chesterton responded, "Yes, let us all become pagans." They all became Christians. I thank you for your kind attention to this episode of The Christopher Perrin Show. If you haven't read the Odyssey, I encourage you to read it. It is mythic, and it tells such pervading and universal truths about our human condition. We're all wandering. We're all polytropic. We're all seeking to find our way home. Thanks again for watching or listening. I'd like to thank you for watching or listening to The Christopher Perrin Show. And to do that, I can give you a coupon code that will give you 10% off on anything that you might care to order at classicalacademicpress.com. And the coupon code is simply CP Show. Thanks again for listening or watching.